meeting so that we can share it with our community. So thanks everyone for joining us for this community update on XCSO's new field testing program. We have a lot of information to share with you today. So we'll just get started if I can get, oh, hang on a minute. I'm not starting very well here. There we go. We'll just get started. So as with all of our community updates, if you have a question, if you could type it into the chat, and then Alex and I will keep an eye on that chat. And if we feel like we know we're going to answer the question eventually, we'll just keep going. If we feel like answering the question right away is the right way to go, we'll do that. We're going to try to keep our presentation to 30 minutes to allow time for questions at the end. Like I said, there's a lot of information here, so hopefully we'll be able to stick to that today. So as we always do, we introduce our staff. I know on this call today, there's myself. I've met pretty much all of you. Katja's on the call today, and Alex. Timo is on the call with us as well. And Jen and Dwayne, I think, are joining us tonight. Yeah, Alex, can you you're letting people in. Okay, awesome. So today what we're going to do is talk about the new testing program, do an overview of it from a high level, why we felt we needed to make the changes or, well, develop a field testing manual and make changes to the type of data that we were recording from our OJST, OST, and NTDC athletes. We're going to look at the protocols, procedures, and how we measure success, and the testing schedule, and a bit about data collection and management. Alex and I'm going to do the first part. Alex is going to go into some of the details of the tests. And we're hoping to publish the official document by the end of this week. Actually, no, we have committed to publishing it by the end of this week. It may be ready a little bit earlier. It's only Wednesday. So without further ado, here we go. As many of you know, and we underwent a strategic planning process in 2023, in which we identified 3 strategic pillars for XCSO. One of them's community, one of them's leadership, and the third one is excellence pillar. This is what we're focusing on today. And our goal under the excellence pillar is that Ontario athletes, coaches, officials, wax technicians, and event hosts are consistently recognized as among Canada's best. And we like to keep returning to our strategic plan to remind us why we're doing this. Before we proceed, I'd like to thank everyone who helped develop this manual. These are the people that were very directly involved in developing the manual. There are many other individuals who we spoke to as well. So Eric Deneisen, Julie Beaulieu at Nordic Canada, Timo, Fred and Nolan, Sheila, Toivo, Eric Bailey, Peter Wiltman, Jack Sassville, and Alex and myself were the key drivers behind developing this testing protocol. So when we identified that strategic goal that we just talked about, one of the things that came out and that we're seeing is that the first one is that the key to achieving our strategic goals is to support the coaches in the province, because it's the coaches that are the ones that are training our athletes. And so this focus on intentional daily training environments, you've seen that terminology in pretty much everything that we publish. And that's what we're trying to get to. So we're going well beyond podiums here. We're trying to create an environment where athletes and coaches are supported in achieving their goals. We're doing this in 3 sort of targeted ways. One is a camps program, which we're not going to talk about today. If there are questions about it at the end, we can talk about that. It's through this provincial testing and monitoring program. That's what the focus of today is. And that hopefully, and the intention is for that to translate into areas where XCSO can identify where there could be some additional professional development to help coaches better enhance their daily training environments. And of course, we're trying to support athlete-centered development at all levels in the province. So when we think about the purpose of testing, we really tried to identify what each audience gains from this. So when you look at this, we're looking at three different groups. We're looking at the athletes. Obviously, testing it's not a race, it's not a performance, it's allowing athletes to measure themselves against themselves. So to give them an opportunity to track progress. Obviously, our aim is to ensure that they're training, where we're doing injury reduction and to build readiness for athletes to continue on their journey, whatever their goals are. For coaches, obviously, you know this because everybody on this call is coaches. Coaches like to engage in testing because it gives them measurements in order to provide individualized training to their athletes. It gives them a tool for objective monitoring. And also gives them data to inform gaps about their individual athletes and maybe about their program as a whole. From XCSO's point of view, what we're trying to do is have standardized benchmarks, and we'd really like to see everyone across the province doing the same testing, because we feel like if we have standardized benchmarks, it's easier for us to work with you as coaches to identify gaps, and obviously with the goal to find some way, through experts and through the funding and the connections that we have at XCSO to bring the professional development to the coaches that they're looking for. It also allows us to compare nationally. So we aren't the only province doing this. BC has been testing and monitoring very successfully for years. We know as a province, we know that individual clubs within our province, some of them have been testing and monitoring very specifically for years as well. But what we're trying to do is see a picture across the province. And obviously the ultimate goal is for all of us to achieve our objectives. Another thing that we've identified when we looked at XCSO's strategic objectives is that XCSO or Ontario used to be the top performing province in the country. BC and Quebec are knocking it out of the park right now. And I like to see that as an opportunity to say that they've raised their bar. And so what can we do as a province? And I know many of you have heard me say this before. What can we do as a province to raise our bar to go and meet them? And so we feel that having the data from a testing program will help us to be able to identify those gaps and support you as coaches in getting there. So what are some of the benefits of testing? I mean, this, your coaches. This slide, I'm just going to let you read it. I'm not a coach. I read this and it means nothing to me, but we felt it was important to share that. We know that skiing is very demanding, both physically and technically for athletes. And so the testing protocols that we've come up with aim to be focused on those. Testing identifies movement quality gaps, and we're trying to develop structural tolerance for individual athletes. When we sat down to build this field guide, there was a lot of discussion around making sure that every test that is included in it is something that through the training that you're doing with your athletes, that there will be improvement on the test for them. And not that you necessarily have to train to the test. The hope is that that the tests that we have chosen are ones where, like I said, through your training will naturally get the athletes to improvements in these tests. And also that all of these tests are very specific to skiing. We're not trying to test things that wouldn't help an athlete perform better. The goal is to have you'll see when the document gets published, it's like step by step, everything that you need in order to do the testing. We're hoping that it's quick to administer with minimal equipment. The goal is for it to be non-fatiguing. You'll see Alex will present some ideas on how to structure the testing so that it can be built into your daily training environment. And the idea, of course, is for it to be repeated regularly to provide meaningful data. Who should participate? So right now, in the athlete contract, for OJST, OST, and NTDC athletes, there is a requirement to submit testing data to XCSO. And so that is a requirement for these athletes. However, our goal here is for all U14 athletes engaged in regular training across the province to participate in this testing at periods that are appropriate for them based on their age. And obviously, the goal is for all the coaches in the province and hopefully all of you on this call to see the benefit of all of us doing the same testing and to engage in this program. So why did we update the protocols that we have? One is that, as I mentioned earlier, different clubs are doing different tests. We looked at Nordic Canada's field testing manual. We spoke to BC, looked at what their testing protocols were, and tried to come up for something that was good for Ontario, but also comparable nationally. So yeah, you can see on here, I don't need to read the slide to you, but it's a combination of helping individual coaches help their athletes, helping us understand as a province how we're doing, and helping to be able to compare nationally how we may or may not be doing on a certain test compared to, say, BC. Wow, I just ran through that because I know we have lots to cover. But any questions at a high level before I pass this off to Alex to go into the detail? No? Okay.
Are the slides going to be available after the presentation?
The slides and the recording and will be available after the presentation. We'll also share the recording from tonight in case there are different questions that come.
Thanks.
Oh, you're welcome, Anthony. Okay, if I can figure out how to use my computer again. Alex.
Hey, awesome. Thank you so much, Stephanie. I'll take it away from here. So as Stephanie was mentioning, as per the athlete agreement, Team Ontario athletes are required to submit this data to XCSO. We are looking at 2 testing blocks, specifically in June, and a reassessment block in September. However, we also would like to just allow, of course, coaches to have the ability to test off as often as they wish. If they want to have a practice assessment, then that is completely fine. However, we are at XCSO looking for 2 sets of data per year, specifically with the U16 year 2 to the senior athletes on the Team Ontario teams. As mentioned by Stephanie, those U14s to U16s year 1, we are having the kind of the requirement for them to submit the data only in September with respect to their age and development stage in the sport. So as Stephanie mentioned, there is in the document a well-structured step-by-step process to deliver the protocols within their structure. The testing manual, it really provides just specific instruction on how to perform each test, from the equipment and location, how to set up the test, to how can athletes prepare, the testing sequence, what we're recording and looking for, as well as a video demonstration specifically for the static tests included in the manual. Okay, so just from a high level, this is the list of chosen protocols and their purpose attached. As mentioned, just all tests are fully explained in the manual. But for today, what we're really going to focus on with this presentation are the sport-specific, what we call the sport-specific tests, particularly the ones that may be new to you. So we will review the hexagonal jump protocol, the erg critical power test, and the comparative speed roller ski test. As mentioned, all 6 of these were considered with our subcommittee and with all individuals involved. And we have created the step-by-step protocols to just deliver these within the manual. Okay, so the first one that we'll take a quick glimpse at is the hexagonal jump test. We found that the purpose of this test was to evaluate explosive power and precision during multi-directional jumping, as well as neuromuscular control and movement efficiency. We found this to be effective with alpine ski as well. And before I kind of jump into some more of the kind of the testing sequences and things to highlight, I would just like us to watch the video example here just to kind of see the demonstration kind of first before we get moving into it more. Okay, so this is the test. So our first sport-specific test, as you can see, the athlete is jumping in and out of the hexagon shape. Within the manual, there are specific guidelines regarding the dimensions that we're looking for. We can see here that the athlete is jumping in and out in both directions, clockwise and counterclockwise. That is a requirement for our field test. Different from the video as well, we will be using hurdles. So there will be, I believe it's 20 centimeters of height that we would be looking for to complete this test, where athletes will be jumping over the hurdle in and out of the hexagon instead of just across the painted or taped line. As mentioned, we will be looking for results for both clockwise and counterclockwise execution. We're looking to give athletes about 3 attempts per direction. So 6 total, 3 counterclockwise, 3 clockwise. And if the hurdle is touched, then the attempt is counted as a disqualified attempt. The same rules apply if a false start occurs. 1 false start is permitted each direction. However, we're looking for clean starts and for the athlete to successfully jump over the hurdle. Are there any questions on this protocol specifically at this time? Okay, we can move on to our next. So our second protocol that we would like to highlight is the critical power test. Many coaches we know already have their go-to kind of favorite erg test. We decided to work with this test as it was developed at Nipissing University and has been used by their team for several years. We know that everyone on this call has a standardized erg test that they like to use. And so that we just ask that you give, this test a change. We know that NTDC has committed to working with this test despite years of data on different tests because they really see the value of having a consistent province-wide test for all athletes to complete. And so we're really just asking for all coaches here and all coaches that have race teams across the province do the same. So when it comes to the purpose of the critical power test, we are really looking for a few things. It's ultimately designated to assess 2 key physiological parameters. One is the maximum sustainable power output, which is what we call critical power. And the second is the anaerobic capacity over a short period of time. When it comes to the data collected from this test can be used to monitor training effectiveness and to inform individualized pacing strategies and training intensities. And what we want to really consider is consistent results across the province. So we're looking for teams to collaborate the ergs by adjusting their drag factor. This may or may not be something new for coaches to do on their erg tests. But what we're really trying to do at XCSO is create the standardized test where we set our machines to 110 drag factor, which is about 7 out of 10 on the damper or the drag factor component on the erg. This just allows us to have, like I mentioned, that standardized test and results that we can compare across the province. Your club may or may not have a limit to access ergs. So this test is designated for 2 athletes to alternate and perform the test together. Allows for clubs to gain time efficiency. And in terms of data recording, we know that athletes will convert their results to watts per kilogram. However, because of the age of the athletes that we are testing, we're not looking for athlete weight or height to be measured or reported. Are there any questions on this protocol specifically? Okay, I think I can move on to our next one here, Stephanie. Perfect. So the third one that we're going to discuss just today is our comparative speed roller ski test. And so what we found the purpose of this test to be is to ultimately assess athletes' upper and lower body strengths and weaknesses by comparing their speed under standardized conditions using a consistent course and timing method. So for this test, we are looking for the ratio of full body skate to double pole and full body skate to legs only. And what we want to use this test for is that these ratios will really help identify strengths, imbalances, and areas for targeted development. We want to use this test as it has been successfully used by British Columbia for years. And we are just simply copying and pasting into our protocols. We've worked with Eric Denise from Nordic Canada just to ensure that we understand the protocols and we'll be able to deliver it effectively. So in terms of how the test sequence works, we first start with the setup. So we want to choose a section of good pavement with a consistent uphill grade. And for this uphill grade, for this section, we are looking for roughly 750 meters of distance or a length that will result in approximately 2.5 to 3.5 minute efforts. We want to make sure that athletes know where they're starting and finishing. So as coaches, we mark the start and finish, and that we're using the same section for all athletes. So once we've established the test location, it is also important for us to stick to this same location for future tests. As a coach for this test specifically, we will need to create a start list for our athletes. And at XCSO, we recommend a 30-second interval. It is also important for this test specifically that we use the same section of road for all 3 efforts as well. So as mentioned, the test has 3 starts, one for full body, first for full body, second for the double pole effort, and third for the legs only effort. Between efforts, we see that there should be exactly a 20-minute kind of buffer after the first one. And then during this time, athletes will use, this opportunity for active or passive recovery. Totally up to them if they would like to have nutrition, hydration prior to returning to the start line. So after they've completed their effort, as a coach, we will record the time of each effort in seconds. It's important that it is in full seconds or in whole seconds. for uploading into the reporting document. And when we report into the document, these ratios will be calculated automatically. We'll talk about the reporting document in a later slide, but we have set up the reporting document so that once we put the seconds in, the numbers in, that this calculation will automatically occur. Once we have some data collected in June, we will provide a kind of green, yellow, and red indicator based off of target ratios. With this data that we collect, we will also work in collaboration with BC to develop kind of these indicators as well. And the beauty of this test is that we are looking for ratios between each effort, not time. Okay, is there any questions specifically on this protocol before we move forward?
It's fully flushed out in the manual, like step by step, exactly how to set it up. It's this is a new test for everyone in the province. So there's going to be a learning curve. Jack Sassville, I don't think he's on this call. He tested it on snow with his athletes when they were still skiing, and just to make sure that we had someone in our crew that had sort of tried it and really felt that it gave some good data. And like we said, BC's been using it for years. So we know there are going to be questions that arise as people work their way through this test, and that we may not get the right data off the first set in June. But like this is a pilot year and a learning year. And so please come back to us once you've read through the manual if there are any questions. But we've really tried to outline it so that it's clear.
Perfect. Thank you, Stephanie. Okay, just moving along. So as coaches, we might think, what would be the best method or delivery method? What would be the best procedure in terms of what test to start with, end with? How would this work? And so within our subgroup, our subcommittee, these are just some examples that we created that we felt would be optimal as kind of sample schedules to use and integrate without overwhelming any single training block. So the majority of these tests can be completed over a Saturday and a Sunday. However, there are also options if you have a training group on Tuesdays, a few times throughout the week, and then also on the weekends as well. The last thing that I want to mention just on this schedule is that once you've committed to a schedule, if it's one of the sample ones that we have here, or one that you think would be more beneficial for your club, we would recommend that as a club or district that we're just maintaining that same structure throughout the season just to ensure comparability and reduce disruptions, but also have that consistency for when we have our second round of testing as well. So if we go with sample one, schedule one in June, that we are using kind of that same sample schedule in September as well. Okay. So just moving on to data collection. To protect athlete privacy, each individual athlete will be assigned to a unique identification number. So they will be assigned to a specific number for any published or shared data. Personal identification or identifying information such as names and ages will not appear in publicly accessible data sets. And Cross Country Ski Ontario's tracking sheet will be hyperlinked to the field testing manual document at the bottom of the document for easy access to submit the data.
Yeah, so I guess just so it's clear, knowing that as part of the athlete contract, the team athletes need to submit this data. We will be collecting the names and clubs of the athletes. So in the database at XCSO, so let's say, Anthony, if you choose to participate in this, what will happen, and we'll look at it in a minute because we've got some samples, you would upload your athlete's data, and it'll say Temiskaming, and so you will see that data and we will see that data. But from that point on, unique identifiers are assigned to the club and to the athlete. So you, as a club coach, know your athlete's data. We at XCSO see the global data. But our commitment is to, like I mentioned, is only to share gleaned data when we're doing comparisons. I mean, we know some of our smaller clubs, people will be able to pick out who individual athletes are probably, but as we're collecting this data, privacy in the data management is extremely important. And we just wanted to reiterate that that we do completely understand and respect that. Yes, Kevin.
What do you see the use of sharing the public data?
Well, we haven't fully defined how, I mean, we're not going to post it on the website. We may have a community update meeting where we bring people together. So one of the things that we talked about in the committee is, for example, let's use the roller ski test. We may see like, wow, Nakertok and Lappy's data is like the ratios are completely different. Why is that? What is Lappy doing or what is Nakertok doing? Like, bring those coaches together, compare the data. What are you doing at your club? What are you doing at your club that's resulting in such different results? And so the idea of that, and what the committee discussed, is that when we start to see those types of things, we can have the opportunity to say, okay, hey, Nolan or Eric, like what can we do about this? Do we want to do anything about this? And then to look into our resources to bring whatever it is that we've identified, a strength or a weakness might be in maybe the whole actually club program, to bring forward some professional development for our coaches. And at that point, we wouldn't just give it to, say, Lappy and Nakertok, using that example. We would share it with the community. So that is an instance where I see where we would be globally sharing the data. So we would have, say, I don't know, whatever we identify that XYZ things would be helpful to coaches in order to make sure that we have stronger double polling. We would have a community update or a lunch and learn, compare some of the data, show the data. You would have your data, Kevin, if you chose to engage in this, from Carleton, and then that would help to inform you as we work through the professional development. So that's our goal. Our goal is not to put up on the website, hey, this is our province, this is what our data looks like. It's to be using it in a very targeted fashion to help our club coaches to be able to deliver better programs, and for us to be able to inform professional development. Does that answer that question?
A follow-up.
Yeah.
It does seem to have a heavier system orientation rather than an athlete-centered orientation. And without, so an athlete-centered orientation would be, what's the progress for this athlete year on year, right?
Yeah.
Which data that actually has age, or test year number 1, test year number 2, if you're tracking a person through, right? Are they making improvements? Have you been able to identify, using this to identify a gap, and right sort of thing? So yeah.
So here's an example. I just jumped ahead a little bit. Now, the data in here, as you can see, this athlete went from 2 pull-ups to 13 pull-ups in 7 days. So the data in here is made up data, right? For the purposes of demonstrating how the app that we'll be using will show the data. So I think one of the things, and thank you, Kevin, for your question, because I think you've actually, through your question, highlighted one of the challenges that we've foreseen from our place here at XCSO, is that as a province, we haven't done a lot of system work, right? And when you look at British Columbia, for example, they do a lot of system work. So one of the things I think is really important as we move forward on this is that we all recognize what our roles is in this. So this tool isn't only supposed to be for XCSO, right? So this is an example right here. This is an individual athlete's progression of pull-ups over 7 days. But ultimately, the club coach will have this information for all of their athletes, each of their athletes. And the club coach can work and say, hey, athlete 100,003, whoever that might be, you will know as a coach who athlete 100,003 is. You'll be able to sit down and have these test results. Now, this isn't really any different from what you would have had in the past if you were doing tests, right? You already would have had this information. So now what you're doing, if you've engaged with this program, is you're sharing it with us so that we can do interclub and national comparison. So we're really hopeful that people will see the value at each level for the athlete, for the coach, for the system, or for the athlete, for the club, for the system. But from our point of view, it is a system. It is absolutely focused on the system. I don't think it's our role at XCSO to be looking at any athlete's individual data unless we see a really true outlier that concerns us. But we're not looking at individual athlete data. That's what you're doing as a club coach. Does that answer that?
Yeah. I just wonder, when you have a large data set, could you then go back, even though the age isn't published with that data set, the age is still attached to that person.
Yeah.
So you could then do, right, what's the change from a U14 athlete to U16 athlete, U18 athlete, sort of thing on a specific test as well.
So here's an example of what the test results looks like through the app. So this result, remembering this is all made up data. So this result is for club 1007, whatever club has been identified with that number. We know we're looking at the women, we're looking at all years of birth, and we're looking at the testing data from here. So we've got what the averages are, and then we see it broken down by year of birth. And then we would obviously be able to get a province-wide number from this, right? Club ID, or we could do province-wide, we can do by club, we can do by athlete.
Right.
And I think as with all changes, this is a pilot year. We are going to be in the manual. It very expressly says we are, if as a coach, while you're doing the testing, if you see problems either in the way it's being, like this doesn't make any sense, I can't follow it, or this has resulted in the following problems, we're asking people to actively tell us this so that we can update it. And then in the fall, after the second round of data, we will be convening people back for a feedback session about how we all felt this went, whether we need to make some changes to it, whether we are using the right tests, whether we feel that there's value to this, should we be reporting things differently. So like with all big changes, and this is, I think it's a pretty big change for the way XCSO has tried to support clubs in the sharing or the compiling and sharing of data. We also, of course, we all need some grace in here to try to get this to be effective for everybody, because the goal isn't just to give XCSO, a whole pile of data.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Thank you for your questions, Kevin. Anyone else? Have any questions? Okay, I'm just going to skip back because I'm not really sure like where we're. Okay, we were on data, this part. Great. Okay. And then, so I've shown you this, individual results. Yeah, so I guess just in summary, I think we just actually spoke about all this and through Kevin's questions, but what are we trying to do here? We're trying to engage clubs and coaches and athletes. We're hoping that our club coaches will come on board and be part of this protocol. We're trying to provide a practical resource that's clear on how to deliver it, that it's easy to follow. We're trying to generate actionable data for athletes, coaches, and XCSO to support program evaluation, looking for strengths and weaknesses, gap analysis being the buzzword these days about what we're doing here. We're trying to strengthen our community by providing, through this data, opportunities to bring us together for professional development and education opportunities that are very specific and targeted. And ultimately, we'd like to be able to benchmark ourselves nationally. The next steps for us at XCSO, once we've launched this, is hopefully to have a meeting with British Columbia and Saskatchewan, who are also interested in some sort of national testing protocol, to see how we can work together and collaborate to support each other and to have some comparative benchmark data and what data that might be. And obviously, before we would share any of that data nationally, we would come back to our community to make sure that we were comfortable with that. So those are some of the goals. There is a glaring hole in this document right now, and Alex did mention it earlier, is that the adaptations for Paranordic are not included in here yet. We wanted to make sure that those were fully fleshed out. So our Paranordic committee and Jen have been working with Leslie Bode at Nordic Canada to make sure that that we've got good testing adaptations for Paranordic athletes. And as Alex mentioned, they're going to be piloting this in a couple of weeks. The other thing that's happening in certain areas of the province is, so for example, Peter Wiltman, who's been involved and who's on this call, but who's been involved in helping us develop these protocols, will be hosting a testing camp in mid-June, and I know he'll be inviting sorry, Peter, if I'm stepping ahead of you and telling you what I think you're going to do, but inviting the NOD coaches to come together in a supportive environment. I know it's a big district, but in a supportive environment. But Peter, I think, is really going to take the lead to support the NOD coaches in delivering this. So each district's a little bit different, right? And in Thunder Bay, for example, NTDC and Lappy and Big Thunder athletes already do some testing together. So that area requires sort of a different level of support. We know that Nakrachok's already doing quite a bit of testing, and hoping that Nakrachok will be able to support possibly some of the smaller clubs in the area that may need help with it, and the same in SOD. So really looking for this to be a collaborative effort, but also trying to set this up in a way where someone like Anthony up in Temiskaming doesn't actually need to travel anywhere to be part of this if he wants to join in this. And Declan, the same for you, and Sue Finish, to be able to give you something that you can do on your own as well with your club. So really trying to keep this as flexible as possible, so that everybody can get involved and behind it. And that's it for the formal part of this. I know we've answered some questions already, but we'll open the floor to you now. Initial reactions, big questions, um, protocol questions, any question. That's what we're here for. This is your time. Thoughts? I know this is a big shift in how we engage, um, specifically and proactively with club coaches as a group. Yes, Kevin.
When I worked with Talk, I was involved in testing there for several years, and some cautions, I'd say. Number of the athletes were very anxious around testing, as coaches would know if they've done some testing. And another thing, the comparison that comes with the group testing, and how do you support an early versus a late bloomer in a club testing environment. And I guess another thing, year after year, changes in equipment, roller skis, right? So truly, what is the improvement you might be seeing? It's not related for only to one factor like training. It is related to growth. It's related to development. These tests, there's a skill component, there's a learning component to the test as well. So, so communicating with the athletes around these issues is important. And an athlete can show improvement with training not being in between in some of these just on physical growth as well. So I think there's a lot to messaging when you're going to a testing system that looks clearly objective as well. So I just wanted to raise those issues. The intention here is as Stephanie and Brian have outlined, right, is to see where our athletes are in the province, sort of thing. But to keep it athlete centered in terms of people that are coming out to our programs for the enjoyment of a physical activity, of a sport, and engaging with friends, and that needs to always remain paramount in all of our daily training.
Yeah, Kevin, where my mind goes as I listen to your comments is that as we talked about providing professional development opportunities as a result of the information that we get, possibly the first professional development opportunity that we should maybe seek out is to address this piece, the culture piece, if I can call it that, the culture piece of testing, and maybe to address the athlete anxiety, the communication to athletes, the messaging, and what we're supposed to be doing and why we're doing this, but all the things that you've just said. I don't need to repeat what you've just said, but that's giving me the idea that that's probably the first piece of professional development that maybe we should be focusing on.
Right.
So thank you.
Right. Yeah. And this is around, a testing protocol, but we have this issue with wearable technology too, right? And that sort of data and how that drives, and maybe how it's even utilized as some way to motivate athletes, right? Sort of thing, which sort of hijacks the love of the sport, sort of thing too, right? So I think there's a broader issue around data, and even how we have stopwatches or record in times and time trials and stuff like that, right? We're generating data and ranking lists and stuff continually, and and how do we support again athletes that are at a different stage of development, different engagement in the sport. Maybe they're multi-sport athlete, right, sort of thing. Because these objective test results, are they are these results predictive, or are they just time snaps for an athlete's development, right?
Mhm.
So
I think, these are all really good. One of the let me respond to that in a different way is when we brought the committee together to discuss the testing protocol, one of the assumptions that we did discuss was the assumption that every athlete and club in Ontario as a group wants to be better than BC and Quebec, for example, that we want to go to nationals and come first, right? And so we talked about that assumption, and it was actually a really good conversation because one of the questions we asked was, from our point of view in the provincial sport office, we want to provide the opportunity to those who want to progress to be able to do that. And it's up to the club coaches to define what the goal or the objectives of their program is, right? And so that was one of the questions we asked, like, do you care? And I'm not going to answer what the answer was, but we did talk about this. Do you care as a club coach, right? About like whether the skiers from one's club and from the province, when we leave the province and go to a nationals, for example, where we perform, or is that not the goal of the program at the club level? So we did talk about that. And we also talked about the fact that in the BC model, and this is the other piece of it that we're not talking about it today, they have a really great camps program. And there's a lot of kids in that program that, from what I'm learning as I learn more about it, that are really engaged in their sport. And I know just unique individual examples are not representative of everyone, but an example would be Cedric's roommate in Calgary last year is an athlete that came from a club where there were really only two athletes. And I asked him straight out, how did you make it onto the academy coming from a small club, And he said it was the camps program. He said, I knew that I was never alone. I had this environment where I could come together with my friends and my peers, and it motivated me. And every 6 weeks we were together as a group. And so, I hear stories like that, and they drive us to try to create an environment, particularly for some of the smaller clubs where you don't have a lot of training partners, and maybe the motivation is hard because you're on your own. That kind of, I think those types of stories help to drive where I hope we can get to without losing the joy and the love of the sport. And I also see that this testing program, it's interesting because this is probably our best attended community update meeting in a long time. So thank you to everybody. But I also don't want it to be like that this is the primary thing that we do at XCSO to support you. This is not the primary thing. This is just a piece of the puzzle. The camps is a bigger piece, right? Is a more important piece because it brings the community together. This is just an element in a bigger puzzle of us trying to support our community in being the best of what it chooses it wants to be. And I hope that by saying this here, that all of you, if you engage in this, hold us accountable to that statement. That, because something like this can actually take a life of its own, right? And so for us to continually remember that this is not our goal. This is a piece of a much bigger puzzle of providing really great daily training environments for our coaches and athletes, where people are achieving their goals, whatever they may be. Yeah. And that's hard. That's hard pieces to make sure that we always remember that. Which is why I appreciate you, Kevin. You hold me accountable to that all the time.
Yeah.
Not the only reason I appreciate you, but I do appreciate these questions that keep this culture piece top of mind. Any other comments from anybody or questions?
Yeah. Hey, Stephanie, it's Alex Maycock here. Just with a couple thoughts I wanted to share with the group about the utility of this, right? If you're putting this time into the testing, how are you going to utilize it in a way that's relevant for the athletes? And I think for the individual athlete, and that's where I think this could be a multi-year process, as you're outlining, where you have these norms for age groups, and you can then have that comparative. Where does this athlete lie in comparison to other athletes at that stage of development for different energy systems, for body awareness and some of the more dynamic movements, for strength, and then being able to objectively track some of those changes at the athlete level. So I think it's important we all see that testing as a longitudinal process from year to year, from time point to time point in the season, and are using it in a prescriptive way, not just in a testing way too. So we are seeing those gaps, addressing them with the prescription, and hopefully closing gaps individually across the club and across the province.
Thanks, Alex.
Mm-hmm.
Stephanie, I have a question back to Alex on that, because I think Alex, you've been involved with the Nipissing program in testing. Can you share an example of how you use that with athletes?
Great point, Kevin. And in that energy system test, the critical power test, the 30-second, 2-minute, 4-minute, essentially each of those trying to target an energy system. The 30-second, your anaerobic power, the 2-minute, your anaerobic capacity, and your 4-minute, your aerobic power, or your VO2 max power. So in a ski specific way, now you have an ergometer power for each of those 3 time points. Yeah, they're short, and I'd also recommend coaches would do a 20-minute more aerobic capacity, like a 3 to 5K time trial on an erg would be another more extended energy system to test as well. And then when you plot that, you could compare it to other athletes within your team. Ideally, you compare it with other athletes across the province or country of that age group, and you see their distance off a norm, or the distance off the top performers in the province or country. And maybe you're noticing which energy systems are weaker and stronger for an athlete. And then you decide, okay, is this athlete at a stage in their career where they want to be focusing more on sprints, and we see their anaerobic system's well developed, let's keep the focus there? Or do you try to close a gap, like let's bring up their aerobic capacity when you see a gap there? That's how I would use it in a prescriptive way. What do you think about that, Kevin?
When you were describing that, I know there's a testing group here in Ottawa that the cyclists go to get tested, and a couple of people have shared their results, and it's been, you're at the results, 2 people, the exact same comment directed back is, your anaerobic system is not developed. It's like a 17-year-old, right? What's their training history, right? Sort of thing. They're out, the cross-country skiing or cycling, they're doing a lot of long aerobic stuff. And right, so it can be prescriptive, but it's also where are they currently in their training, right? You're not going to have a highly developed anaerobic system if you haven't been doing that. But if you're a soccer player and you're forward, right, you're doing all these short sprints, you may, that energy system may be more developed than a teammate, right, sort of thing. So as coaches, we need to understand that time and that training history as well, to benefit from using this data to give feedback to the athlete and be prescriptive and supportive prescription, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully that can facilitate some of those conversations with the athlete and parents about where the athlete might want to be putting their focus, from energy system development, from strength development, all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good.
Yeah, listening to this conversation, I think one of the objectives when we picked the 6 tests that we picked was that they were all measuring different things. So, like to your point, Kevin, if someone's a forward on a soccer team, they're going to do better on one test than maybe the majority of the athletes. But all of those tests are designed to, as a group, I'm like, if one athlete is the top performer in all of the tests, it should translate into that they're a top performer in skiing, because those tests were very carefully chosen to be what's the word I'm looking for?
Ski specific.
Ski specific and relevant to the training that you're doing in skiing, that would translate into a test result that matters, right? We actually had a significant amount of conversation around the 3,000 meter run test, and whether we should have that test in there. But where we got to with that one is that your engine is a really important component of being a performing cross-country skier, and that is the best test for your engine. And people will say, like, if you can run on under a 9-minute 3K as a U18 and older man, like, you've got this nailed, right? But we know that there are athletes on our national ski team that can't run a 9-minute 3K, but they do really well on the other tests too. So I think we have to see this as a suite of tests, I guess, for lack of a better word, and that we're really, really tried to focus on all the systems that we need to be better skiers, stronger skiers.
Stephanie, was there discussion around connecting data, testing data with performance data?
Not at this point. I mean, I think that would ultimately be the objective at some point, possibly, but I think what we've been doing is looking at the strategic objectives and seeing how, I mean, the first thing that we identified in our strategic plan was that as a province, if we want to perform in ski races, we need to be supporting or having more intentional daily training environments. So we know that the clubs that have full-time paid coaches, generally speaking, perform better, if performance is what we're looking for, right? When you go to a ski race. And that didn't used to be the case in the province, because we used to have really good coaches all over the place. And it wasn't like limited down to 4 or 5 clubs, right? So one of the goals in this is not of the testing, but the whole thing is to support the club coaches in having what they need, even if they're volunteer club coaches, to be able to support their athletes. And we've seen already some changes, which is great. We have more teams, more clubs represented on our ski teams. And I think, in the long run, if we have a system that can support that, that'll be better for everybody. It will keep more people in skiing, because they will be having joy in what they're doing, because they feel good about it. They're getting good coaching. They have a good community around them. So it is part of something much bigger. Yes, Anthony. Can I call you Tony? I call you Tony. Do people call you Tony, or is it just Anthony? Oh, you're muted if you're speaking, Anthony. Or maybe the hand up wasn't for us. Wasn't for us. Okay. Anyone else have any feedback? Questions? I mean, we've passed our time, but we do have more time if people want to. Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us, and yeah, we look forward. And if anybody wants to call and speak to Alex and myself or anybody on the committee about anything about this testing protocol, if you're on the fence about whether you want to join us in this journey, please reach out to us, and we'd be happy to talk to you about maybe what we need to do, or come to the feedback sessions in the fall to see what we can be doing so that more of the club coaches across the province will be interested and feel comfortable and wanting to participate in this initiative. Okay, so just a housekeeping item. So the slides and the recording of this session and the session tonight will be posted to the website sometime tomorrow. And that protocol will be published by the end of the week. As we're just actually just trying to put the finishing touches on the recording template, on the actual spreadsheet for recording of data, to make sure that it works for you and it works for us when we get it. We look forward to having everyone engaged in the first testing block in June. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thank you,
Peter.
Max.
You're welcome, Declan. We can talk in front of Jen. Just a sec. Because we have our NTDC meeting at 1 and it's 1:08. Let me stop the recording.